And if I told you once, I ain't gonna tell you twice. No ma'am, no sir. Salute all my real ones. Yeah. So listen, champ, we got how Honda broke supercars. Just literally it became a transformer and snapped them into... I don't know how I did it, so we gonna get straight to the video. But before we do that, like button, subscribe button, notification bell, press those. Let's go!
The word supercar has never really meant anything.
Supercar!
It's closer to an emotion than any kind of specific word, definition, or number.
I've always thought of supercars as cars that have like either double or triple the normal horsepower of a regular everyday car. So like, you know how Hondas, Nissans, and Toyotas have 200 horsepower. Then to me, a supercar was always something with like 500, 600 horsepower up. That's a supercar. And then you got exotic cars, which is the same thing as a supercar body, but the body style is different. So it's always been like the Lambs and the Ferraris, the McLarens, the Zondas, the Bugattis. Well, no, they're not the Bugattis. And then you got hypercars, which is cars that, you know, $1 million plus. The Bugattis, the Paganis. I can't even think of anything else. Let me know in the comment section.
And in the late 1980s, supercar meant two things: Ferrari and Lamborghini.
This machine makes no practical sense whatsoever.
Testarossa.
Yeah, but wouldn't a Nismo, what is it? You know, the Nissan, the Nismo, the GT, wouldn't that be a supercar as well? Because it goes really, really fast. It just looks like a regular car. Same thing with a Demon or a Hellcat. Like they go really fast, but they look like regular cars.
328, Countach, even the Yalpa. Sure, the Countach was
like the
a
new
neck
Countach.
breaker. It looked like nothing else, but it drove like a tractor. Its windows didn't open. You couldn't see out of it. And as an owner, you knew every truck driver within 100 miles by name. You baked them cookies for Christmas. What I'm saying is, they never ran. Ferraris weren't much better. Their 328 took muscle and clenched teeth just to shift into gear. No power steering, weird pedal placement. It wasn't a car you drove every day. Supercars, for pretty much their entire existence up until 1990, were fast first, stylish second, and reliable, well, let's just say the Italians don't have a word for that. That all changed in 1990. When the smallest, cutest, most humble car company absolutely broke the definition of supercar. A new standard of performance cars, reliable, practical, affordable, all while being fast enough to leave that Lambo in the rear view mirror. A car that let every Italian manufacturer know that they were lazy, they were uninspired, they were asleep at the wheel.
Supercar.
In 1990, the word itself had a new meaning. This was the NSX, the Japanese sports car that broke supercars.
So you saying all the Uber drivers down the street are driving supercars?
Rewind. It's 1983.
Honda scooters. They're everything but ordinary.
Honda back then was just a plucky little economy car brand. CRX, Prelude, Civic, front-wheel drive cars meant to be as reliable, cheap, and efficient as humanly possible, while still being just fun enough to not put the driver to sleep. But behind the boring city car brand was actually a team of dedicated racing engineers conquering Formula 2 in the early 80s.
With their V6, 340 horsepower Honda engine.
They had an engine that won in 81, 83, and 84. They just needed a car to show the world what they were capable of.
My favorite car
But what
is
the hell
TLX.
does Honda know of
And
designing
that got
fancy
354
mid-engine supercars?
And a sedan.
Well, nothing really. They hadn't even made a proper sports car yet. They had no experience making midship cars, without even an inkling of how to start. So, late at night, or at least assume it's late at night and supported by a few cans of Sapporo, Honda engineers started tinkering with engine placements and drive types. Up till now, they only made front-engine, front-wheel drive cars. So they took a Honda City, yes, a Honda City, one of the least sporty cars ever, and slapped an engine in the back and took it for a spin around the parking lot. The engineers were immediately blown away. The handling of this weird Frankenstein econobox was actually tight, dynamic, and exciting. Honda's team were ecstatic. They had tasted what it was like to build something special. Seriously, the NSX you know and love today owes everything to bored engineers and a Honda City. It's pretty wild. Meanwhile, Honda Corporate was prepping the Acura brand for us Americans. They needed a halo car, something to show the Yanks that they came to win, that this wasn't just another Honda. Honestly, 1980s Honda was out of their freaking minds. They could have taken one of their cars, made it rear-wheel drive, got a team of engineers to make a tuning division, and released a pretty decent little sports car. But they said, fuck it. The clapped-out Honda City in the parking lot is our muse. We're building a freaking supercar. We don't want to beat Nissan. Forget BMW and Mercedes. We want to take down Ferrari. The project lead, Shigeru Uehara, told them to create a car that could outperform the Ferrari 328, but make it a Honda. Honda didn't make difficult cars. They made reliable, respectable, and easy to drive cars, and the same should apply to their sports cars. The Honda Supercar should be able to spend a day at a racetrack and drive home in one piece. You should be able to park it on the street, see out of it, survive an accident in it. The Honda Supercar should be an actual good car. What a revolutionary concept. But in the 1980s, that is not what Italy was making. Honda's vision of the NSX may seem tame now, but in 1985, they were making history. Just in a very, very Honda way. They set out to change the world of sports cars with a piece of graph paper. Uehara and his team plotted out every competitive sports car on a graph, comparing power to weight.
I've always been saying this, right? Why don't they take, like, there should be divisions within each company where they take old cars, right? So, you know, the NSXs, the Skylines, the Wagoneers, whatever car, you know, was popular in the 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s. And the company should come out with them again, but with updated technology. So it's basically like you're releasing the old body style, but everything on the interior is updated. I've always said they should do that. And obviously for financial reasons, it doesn't make sense, but I still think, especially with the chip shortage, which it would still be affected because you're putting brand new technology in those cars, it would still affect it. But I think that would be a great idea. Like, it's almost like how Jordan retros old sneakers. Car companies should retro older cars and car models.
At vehicle weight and wheelbase. And oddly, the competition all fit into sort of a band on the graph that they ended up calling the Milky Way. Then, they plotted the current Formula One car. There it stood, way out there. They had their target. The NSX would push as close as it could to the Formula One balance of power, weight, and dimensions. And thus, it would go beyond what every other sports car and supercar of the time was doing. It would stand alone. Now, to create a car like no one else had before, Honda needed to, you know, do what no one else had done before. Look, if you know Honda, they don't solve things the American or Italian way. Just throw more horsepowers or cylinders at it until it's fast. So they had to be clever. And the task they set for themselves was not an easy one. They struggled to balance the car's weight and power. The team traveled back and forth between the Honda R&D centers in Japan on the bullet trains, and suddenly, it hit them. There they were, riding back and forth, trying to figure out how to make the fastest car they could, riding on the fastest trains in Japan, which were made of aluminum. Up to this point, no one had made an all-aluminum monocoque production car before. This was it. The secret ingredient to make a car with reliable power and low weight. The perfect balance. Their trainspiration shaved 200 pounds off the car, and more importantly, revolutionized the use of aluminum in the entire automotive industry. And this is where Honda almost drops the ball completely. You see, once they had the chassis designed and all the bits ironed out, they put a single cam Accord engine in it.
has a classic design and an engine that sings.
Yeah. The original concept for the NSX was just to put a parts-bin engine in it out of the Accord. You make an entirely revolutionary new way to manufacture a sports car chassis. You're launching a whole new luxury brand in the United States with this as your halo car, and you give it a gutless sedan engine. So it's set to debut at the 1989 Chicago Auto Show, and the president of Honda, Tadashi Kume, gets ready to show the world Honda's new prototype flagship supercar. There's already some other brand making a presentation on stage, and Kume just fires up the prototype backstage like a badass. The crowd is stunned and intrigued at what Honda has behind the curtain, but Kume himself is flabbergasted. Revving up the NSX prototype, he realizes the car doesn't have Honda's new revolutionary VTEC system. So he presses his engineers, who tell him that VTEC is only planned for 4-cylinder applications. He screams at them, "You idiots, this is unacceptable." Or, maybe he said something like that. Kume forces the NSX team to develop an
You idiots, you will take this shame to your grave. Now do like the samurai. I have nothing but respect for the Japanese. They don't play no games. Like, I learned my lesson. This is not a flex. My first car was a German car. It should not. My first car should have been a beater, and it wasn't. I promise you, until the end of days, I will never ever own anything that's not made by Lexus or Acura. Ever. Unless, like, somehow I become, like, super... And even still, I'm gonna have Lexus or Acura.
An entirely new 6-cylinder VTEC engine. And thank God he did, because the new C30A engine was Honda's best yet. A 3-liter dual-cam V6, the second Honda engine ever to receive the VTEC technology, and the first time the American audience would ever feel VTEC kick in. It was a revolution. It saved the NSX from becoming the Japanese DeLorean. It propelled the NSX from just being a pretty face to a full-on world-beating supercar.
That new DeLorean looks
featuring
crazy,
a variable volume induction system that gave the car an incredibly broad torque curve. It had titanium connecting rods. This allowed the engine to go up to an 8,000 RPM redline. In manual transmission trim, the NSX empowered 270 horses to propel it to 60 in under 6 seconds. Top speed over 160 miles per hour. In development, Honda had its sights set plainly on Ferrari, with the 328 being the performance baseline, and the NSX absolutely kept pace. It even hung with the 348 that followed it, but they weren't done. With the vision in place, an engine breathing life into the car, with their materials sorted and performance targets in sight, Uehara and his team produced a prototype NSX capable of testing in 1989. And with the help of one racing legend, they unlocked the NSX's full potential. The NSX prototype spent an entire month at Suzuka Circuit, getting pushed to its absolute limits. By fate, the famed Formula One legend Ayrton Senna was in Japan to test out a McLaren which was powered by a Honda. And look, he ain't no idiot. When the guy who makes your racing engine asks you to come by the racetrack and do a couple of laps in the new supercar, you oblige. After a full month of refining the NSX at Suzuka, the engineers were confident they'd wow Senna with how the NSX carved an apex. Senna eats a biscuit, drinks a coffee, does a few laps, gets out of the car, scratches his head and tells them it's a bit fragile. Engineers were stunned. Their car was good, but not perfect. The NSX went back under the knife again and emerged months later 50% stiffer. Honda even employed a Cray supercomputer to perfect the aluminum suspension design. This was maximum effort from Honda. There were no corners cut. And now, because of it, the NSX was a taut, sharp supercar ready to compete on the world's stage. All thanks to the legend Ayrton Senna, a bullet train, and a supercomputer. With the car properly sorted, with 400 patents filed.
A world-class race driver, a world-class train system, and a world-class computer. Yeah, because you find those every day.
An entirely new way of making a production car pioneered. It was time for the world to see what the nerds at Honda had been making in secret.
The NSX from Acura. Because when we entered Formula One racing, we wanted more than just a trophy to show for it.
Honda's $140 million project had paid off. At around 60 grand brand new, the NSX broke sports car molds left, right, and center. Magazine journalists praised it as a revelation. Consumers were stunned to see such a sleek, fast, elegant machine coming from the economy car brand. Mr. Ferrari and Captain Lamborghini probably shit their pants. Here was a car that beat them at their own game, on its first try, for half the cost of a mid-level Ferrari. It was beautiful, it was fast, it was drivable, it was reliable, and it was cheap. A supercar for reasonable people. A Ferrari for the guy who leaves a big tip at the restaurant. A Lamborghini for people that say thank you. Yes, on paper, especially now, the NSX is almost laughable. It's cute. A V6, no turbos or superchargers, under 300 horsepower, kind of understated styling. But numbers were never what the NSX was about. It was a balanced, sharpened knife. In the right hands, it was as deadly and as fast as anything the likes of Ferrari, Porsche, or Lamborghini could even hope to achieve. When you look at the NSX today, it's almost quaint, but that's because you're looking through the lens of every supercar and sports car that it made possible. The reliable, drivable supercar changed the auto industry forever. At least, the douchey, overpriced, and unreliable part of the industry. Lamborghinis now looked low-class, poorly designed, unrefined. Ferraris now needed to be faster, more reliable, and easier on their owners. If a Japanese company could come out with a V6 sports car that costs half as much and performs just as well, Italy needed to wake the hell up. In multiple reviews, stacked up against the Ferrari 348, the Porsche 911, the Lotus Esprit, and whatever else the world had to offer, the NSX stood above. It was such a revolution, it helped inspire one of the greatest supercars of all time.
It kinda looks like the car from the movie The Wraith with Charlie Sheen, the Turbo Interceptor.
The McLaren F1. Gordon Murray, the F1's designer, cites the NSX as direct inspiration for the F1. It was the benchmark that the world's first hypercar was set against. Today, more than 30 years since its release, the NSX seems almost boring, pedestrian. If you saw one on the road, you might give it a second glance, but you might not even notice it passing you. And for its 15 years of production, the NSX suffered its own success. You see, the supercar giants stepped up their game to beat the NSX and won. The McLaren F1 showed the world sports car perfection. The Lamborghini Diablo changed how expensive cars looked forever. The Ferrari 355 and 360 cemented the prancing horse as the de facto fast car. And the NSX remained largely unchanged. It kind of faded from memory. So while today the NSX is all but dead, let's not talk about that second generation. You have to imagine that in
Yo, you know what's crazy? People hate on it, but I like the one that they introduced when they reintroduced it. I like the looks of it. Obviously, I've never driven one, so I don't know what it feels like to be behind the wheel of it. But the actual design of it, I don't like the new redesigned one.
a few garages in Italy, parked among prototype Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and any one NSX sits under wraps. A stark reminder to those that make fast cars to never rest on their laurels.
Nah, this was good, man. This was definitely good. So, what we do in a situation like this, ladies and gentlemen, hit that like button. Yeah, man. Nah, I thought this was really dope. You know, like I said, I like the first introduced model of the second generation one, 2017, 2016, 2018, around that time. I really like how it looks. And I remember like the car reviewer saying that it just didn't handle well and it lacked power, which is always a problem when you're talking about the Japanese brands. They never put the most power into their cars, but they're like, all right, cool, there's a trade-off. We put less power, we can make the car more reliable because we don't have to push the engine to its limits, which is pretty smart. But yeah, man, I think it's supposed to be 100 horsepower or like the less horsepower per liter, I think, and you want to keep it like under 80 or under 90. So you want to stay under 90 horsepower per liter. Some shit like that. I don't know. Let me know what y'all thought about the video. My name is Rain. Catch you on the flip side. RCP salute. Wait for it.